I was just giving a presentation on Booker T. Washington, and well, it was actually on W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington's relationship. Now, just to kind of make it clear for anybody who doesn't know, there was not a positive relationship between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. And it was a lot of ego on either side. Booker T. Washington had a great deal of influence, and particularly, he had a great deal of influence over what was called the Tuskegee Machine and the white philanthropic organizations and people who funded black organizations and black leadership during the turn of the 20th century. Now, originally, W.E.B. Du Bois was 12. He was 12 years the junior of Booker T. Washington, and really tried not to tick him off, because Booker T. Washington had built his name in the game, but Frederick Douglass was the man as it came to black leadership in the United States. And it was at the point that Frederick Douglass passed that, who would be the person to step up as the next black leader. Now, you got to understand, Frederick Douglass was a slave and had experienced slavery more so than Booker T. Washington, who came about emancipation at 9 years old, and especially W.E.B. Du Bois, who never experienced slavery and had very little of the impact of the direct racism and the vitriol of racism of United States of America racism until the short time he went to Fisk. And when he went to Fisk, he was still 15 years old. And after Fisk, he went to Berlin. So a lot of his young life, he was, and even at Fisk, he was around the educated black folks and some of the quote unquote educated white people, not really the down south, hang 'em quick, really, really impenetrable racists and violence that was known of the Southern black experience. Now, Booker T. Washington grew up in that and had something to measure his experience against, as opposed to Du Bois, who grew up in Massachusetts with a much lesser experience. Now, do not get it twisted that the North was free and black folks were okay up there. It's not like that now, so don't misunderstand that that's how America was then. But it was a much different experience than what Booker T. Washington experienced. Plus, the transatlantic experience of W.E.B. Du Bois allowed him to travel throughout Europe, where he got to see the world and society and governments and interactions amongst races completely different than Booker T. Washington, who freed from slavery, worked in salt mines as a child, worked as a domestic, and walked 400 miles from West Virginia to the Hampton Institute to attend school, went through school as a janitor to help pay for him to go to school, slept under a sidewalk for months to save money to even go to school once he had walked from West Virginia to the Hampton Institute. I mean, just a completely different experience of the formative years. Now, why do I say this? Because in this debate, people have, after the civil rights movement, because so much of the civil rights resolution bared a lot of the position of W.E.B. Du Bois, people have shunned the perspective and the Atlanta Compromise, which was Booker T. Washington's official laying out of his policy after the death of Frederick Douglass and becoming the lead spokesman of black leadership in America. He was looked at as a sellout or as a placater of the black experience because he wanted to function within segregation, within the social roles given to black people as opposed to fighting for equality. And it was misunderstood that he was not a revolutionary. He was. He was extremely a revolutionary, but he had a unique and logical perspective. He was very much ahead of his time. Number one, he understood the value in maintaining segregation. One problem that we have in the black community now is that all of the successful black people leave the black community. So there are no positive role models in the black community. We don't see our doctors, our lawyers, and all of that. He knew that there was value in that. So he wasn't big on desegregation. Number two, he knew to function on business and not formal education, French, Spanish, world history. He was like, you know how to make bricks? Let's make bricks and start a brick company. You know how to make roads? Let's build our roads. Let's build our schools. Let's build our buildings. He understood that all of this was about money. Also, what he understood was, I can't insult you and then ask you for something. And a fact was white people owned everything. So he also believed in the goodness of men, white people, period. That if you got to see my productivity, you would then understand your perception of me is wrong. Now, that's where I believe he was a bit disillusioned. But to represent the Tuskegee power engine or or Booker T. Washington as not a revolutionary is actually incorrect. Now, prior to 1940, most of your representation of W.E.B. Du Bois was not positive. It was very pro Booker T. Washington. And as I said earlier, once the civil rights movement came about, it kind of changed. So there was a lot of support and understanding in Booker T. Washington's effectiveness. So I think that that's something that should be looked at. When we're talking about our leadership, I think we kind of go past Booker T. Washington a little bit too much because I think people did not completely understand the logic behind the Atlanta Compromise. So I encourage everybody to look back at the compromise and look at what the ultimate goal was. The ultimate goal was equality. The ultimate goal was the sharing of resources, which he was the best at his time at doing. The ultimate goal was self-sustaining and entrepreneurship, which is really what we need to be focused on more than college education when we're talking to our young people today.